Do you want to use this?
The Committee on Military Veterans and Homeland Security will come to order. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Chair Conlon,
Here.
Representatives Coleman,
Here.
Key Carter,
Present.
Stone,
Here.
Rogers,
Here.
Flagella,
Here.
Markkinen,
Here.
Bazat, Martin, St. Germain.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 8 members present and a quorum.
Representative Stone moves to adopt the minutes from the June 6, 2023 meeting. Seeing no objections, the minutes are approved. Today, we will be having testimony on and voting out House Concurrent Resolution 5 and House Resolution 119. First, I would like to take up Representative Rogers' resolution, H.R. 119. Rep. Rogers and Kevin Hensley, you are welcome to come to the table. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As we heard in committee recently, PTSD and traumatic brain injuries are all too common amongst our veterans and our general population. Worse, they are difficult to treat, and individual recovery from these injuries can vary widely as different treatments and therapies' effectiveness varies between individuals. No single effective solution exists to treat PTSD or closed head injuries, but there is evidence to suggest that at least one option is significantly underutilized and tragically not covered by the Veterans Administration for our veterans. On the screen before you is a picture of a hyperbaric oxygen therapy vessel. It's also known as HBOT, and it consists of breathing pure oxygen in a pressurized environment. The room air we are currently breathing is 21% oxygen, and a patient undergoing treatment for a specified amount of time, often 2 hours, breathes in 100% saturated oxygen, giving the lungs the ability to absorb significantly more oxygen than at normal pressure at normal oxygen concentrations. Healing tissues requires higher amounts of oxygen than healthy tissues in order to survive and for the body to repair itself. With higher levels of oxygenation, the body releases growth factors and stimulates stem cells to begin working. The use of hyperbarics in medicine dates way back, actually, to 1662, when a British physician named Henshaw placed patients in steel containers with pressurized air. While oxygen was discovered in 1775, it wasn't until 1937 when doctors Benke and Shaw utilized hyperbaric oxygen to treat decompression sickness, and some of us probably know it as the bends, and it dissolves nitrogen gas in the blood when the blood forms air bubbles and pressure is too quickly decreased around an individual, often during ocean dives. Further research into the use of hyperbaric oxygen continued with applications in cardiac surgery and to increase the effectiveness of radiation therapy in cancer treatments. In the 1960s, hyperbaric oxygen research for treating traumatic brain injuries began in animal studies. As research continued through the decades, it was found that HBOT had significant neuroprotection effects by increasing tissue oxygenation, reducing inflammation or swelling, decreasing cellular death, reducing intracranial pressures in the brain, and promoting growth of neurons and blood vessels. Throughout the research, HBOT has been demonstrated to be safe for patients with few but manageable complications, which are no more frequent than any other medical intervention. The FDA has approved HBOT for the following conditions: air and gas bubbles in the blood vessels, anemia, burns, carbon monoxide poisoning, crush injuries, decompression sickness, gas gangrene, hearing loss, infections of the skin and bone, radiation injuries, skin graft flaps at risk of tissue death, vision loss, and wounds, for example, non-healing diabetic foot ulcers. This last one is of special interest to me as the first hospital I practiced in Dallas, Texas, had a hyperbaric chamber and used it daily to treat wounds all over the body with great success. As the FDA has approved the treatment and found that serious complications are rare for many conditions, the potential for uses for other injuries presents significant opportunities. A 2022 Florida study looked at the use of HBOT and examined 39 veterans with treatment-resistant PTSD and found that among the group receiving treatments, there was significant improvement in questionnaires used to diagnose their PTSD, significant improvement in symptoms with depression screening tests, and most excitingly, improvements in brain microstructural integrity as well as brain functional MRI testing. So on the screen, you can see before a hyperbaric treatment on the left, so those areas of dark blue are severely reduced perfusion or blood flow of the brain, and then you can see what a difference it made after the hyperbaric treatments. Dr. Allison Bested and her team in Florida have published results of these kinds of cases, and it proves the power of hyperbaric oxygen therapy to stop suicidal ideation by healing brain wounds. These 39 participants also reported reduced pain, improved moods, improved sleep, and this last outcome translated into an average of 46% improvement in the measured symptoms. Dr. Bested's study is one of a decade-long record of 20 peer-reviewed studies demonstrating safety, efficacy, and cost-effectiveness of hyperbaric oxygenation to repair body and brain wounding caused by combat, including blasts, falls, training, weapon blasts, and IEDs. Another study conducted by Dr. Paul Harsh and his team in 2011 laid the groundwork for this 2022 study. Harsh's study, published in the Journal of Neurotrauma, treated 16 active duty and retired veterans with hyperbaric oxygen. All 16 received their TBI at least 3 years before the study and suffered from post-concussion syndromes and PTSD. After 40 treatment sessions in 1 month, the veterans showed substantial improvements in post-concussion symptoms, including headaches, cognitive function, increased brain flow, and improved quality of life. The cognitive gains were also incredible. The veterans achieved a full 15-point increase in their IQ testing. In addition to treating the TBIs, researchers saw improvement in PTSD symptoms as well. The findings in these studies are encouraging, but as you can imagine, these small studies with small sample sizes are evident of these possibilities, but larger longitudinal studies would assist in proving the efficacy of these treatments. There are an estimated 24,000 veterans living in Michigan who could benefit from access to HBOT. Psychotherapy and pharmacological interventions don't always work, and certain prescription drugs designed to treat PTSD can have unintended consequences, including addiction. If HBOT has the potential to help veterans, particularly those who have not seen results from traditional medical interventions, we should prioritize research from this treatment to ensure it is covered by the VA and the Department of Defense. If the frontline intervention for depression is ineffective for many with PTSD, we should examine these other treatments. Dr. Alan Francis, professor emeritus at Duke University and chair of the task force that produced the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DCSM-4, which is the preeminent guidance for mental health practitioners, wrote in an op-ed decrying the overuse of pain and psychotropic drugs for our combat veterans in response to the suicide crisis affecting our armed forces. He's particularly concerned about the addition of medications when one fails to have the effect desired. Dr. Francis said, quote, "The biggest problem in the current treatment of PTSD is polypharmacy, which usually does more harm than good and raises the risk of addiction and overdose." When powerful drugs interact and veterans fail to see relief from symptoms of PTSD, they are more likely to seek self-medicating options in illicit drugs and alcohol, which can lead to addiction and additional self-harm. If the primary obstacle standing in the way of the VA from covering hyperbaric oxygen treatment for our veterans with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries is lack of research, then it is incumbent upon the FDA to facilitate this research as soon as possible. Our veterans are suffering, and it is within our ability to conduct the peer-reviewed, double-blind, large participant studies to validate the years of research and anecdotes we already have. This resolution calls on the FDA to facilitate this research now. It will express the will of the Michigan House of Representatives that this treatment is important and needs immediate action. Too few know about this potential option to treat these intractable conditions not otherwise addressed by standard interventions, and I hope that by uplifting this issue and resolution, we will raise attention to the state and federal level about the promise of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. This resolution in and of itself is one track in a multi-pronged approach to gain access to this treatment for veterans, and I am happy to work with other members in the legislature as chair of House Health Policy Committee and members of this committee try to find a state-based solution to this crisis while our federal legislators work to solve this problem at the VA and DoD level. Last year, this resolution passed the House of Representatives unanimously. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am available for questions, but members may want to hold until our next person gives personal testimony on his experience with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. With me today is Kevin Hensley, VFW National Legislative Committee member. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rogers, and thank the committee for allowing me to be here today. In 2017, I was diagnosed with constrictive bronchiolitis, a terminal lung disease. I figured that if I inhaled toxic exposure from burn pits and other toxins in Iraq and Afghanistan, and actually out of 4 out of my 8 deployment locations in the Middle East, that it would have to go and travel somewhere else in my brain, or somewhere else in my body, and it led to my brain. In 2018, I went to Littleton, Colorado, in a company called SearScan for a SPECT scan similar to what you saw the representative put on the screen. I was diagnosed with toxic encephalopathy, which 90% of my brain was deprived of oxygen. I was also diagnosed with a moderate TBI, diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and also depression. After coming home from that, I looked for 3 things. I looked for answers, hope, and solidarity. Because when you have answers, regardless of how bad or how good those answers are, you have hope. You can find a direction and a path that'll lead you to the right choices down the road and help you follow a path so that way you can help others who are in the similar paths that you ran into. Once I found North Star Neurology and North Star Hyperbarics in Tucson, Arizona, I traveled 2,100 miles from the state of Michigan. Trust me when I would say I would rather travel 21 miles versus 2,100 miles to get this treatment. What you see in front of you is a multiplex chamber, which means that it holds more than one person inside this chamber. This chamber in itself held 6 of us at a time, on the average about 3 to 4 at a time, going through this with 100% medical grade oxygen, breathing through a mask that you see there, and inhaling and exhaling through the mask. What does the body need? The body needs oxygen and the body needs water to survive. You're getting a dose of 100% medical grade oxygen at 1.5 atmospheric pressure, which is roughly about 33 feet under sea level. Hence what the representative said earlier about Navy divers in the 1600s and now currently treating those divers as well. As I sat in this chamber, I met people from all over this nation, veterans, first responders, and also Border Patrol agents who were involved in accidents, PTSD, trauma, poisoning from toxic exposure relative to carbon monoxide poisoning. It's ironic how these modalities that are approved by the FDA mirror the same issues that we're having as veterans and first responders. We sat in this chamber and we talked about our lives. We helped one another as we were going through this for our first time. As veterans and also first responders, that's what we do. We help those who are struggling. This was my home for a month and a half. I would do this in the morning for roughly about an hour, 53 minutes at pressure, and I wait 4 hours later and I would do this again. I completed 80 dives or 80 sessions over the course of time. The representative mentioned that Dr. Paul Harsh from Louisiana recommends the initial dives to be 40. Some do more than 40, obviously I did, and some do right at 40, and we get reevaluated at that 40 sessions to see if we need to continue on. There's veterans there that have eclipsed over 100 dives due to their trauma. I've had veterans who had a weapon in their mouth 2 days before they came to hyperbaric oxygen treatment, and after 40 dives, you would physically recognize them, but you would not mentally recognize them. They were a whole new person after receiving this treatment. I've seen another Army veteran, staff sergeant from the Army, who was on the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's within the next 2 years at the age of 44 because of the multiple TBI, excuse me, pardon me, the multiple TBIs and also toxic exposure problems that we were having during our deployments. This, again, was my home from September 7th until October 21st of 2021. This is why I went there. You see the large portion of numbers there on the top of my brain scan. You will see the green is toxic encephalopathy, the blue is TBI, the reddish orange is PTSD, and the yellow is anxiety and depression. This is what led me to North Star Hyperbarics and North Star Neurology in Tucson, Arizona. The scan on the right side, if you look at that, the one to the left of my brain over there is the actual what a functioning brain should look like. All those tentacles, I call it the avatar brain. So if you've ever watched Avatar, when they hook into the animal right there with those tentacles are supposed to go all the way up to your skull. And you can see that there is gaps in my brain between those areas of where the concussions actually took place. That is called an MRI DTI. I'm not a medical professional, but again, that's the significance of what's going on there with me. Again, answers provide hope, and hope provides solidarity. We treated over 21,000 veterans with an organization called treatnow.org, and only one committed suicide out of those 21,000 that we've treated. A far cry from over the 22 a day that we're seeing in our veteran population. After I came home from this, I had the opportunity to become the legislative director for the state of Michigan for the VFW. I will tell you that prior to this, as a leader of 200 to 400 service members at one time, and security and law enforcement operations at Robins Air Force Base before I retired in 2015, to coming home and basically feeling like the rug was pulled out from underneath me. I was on 48 pills. I call it the toxic fog. I felt like I couldn't reach the refrigerator door. I would keep grabbing that door, and I could not pull the handle of that door because I couldn't feel like I could cognitively function properly. You go to that, and you have to understand that being a father and a husband, and the difficulties it was to be able to even just understand what was going on with me and the situation that I was in, it was pretty drastic. We took these measures to be able to make sure that I could take care of my family. I don't like to say I don't like to say me, I like to say we. My wife had enough. Again, she found Dr. Miller in Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, the pulmonologist who diagnosed me with constrictive bronchiolitis. After that, she found SEER scan, a SPECT scan that told me all this stuff that you see here, pictured here today. This is the type of stuff that thousands upon thousands of veterans are facing. They don't have the opportunity to get a SPECT scan. They don't have the opportunity to get these types of scans because, unfortunately, the VA does not provide this. I am here today to tell you that if I listened to the VA, they would tell me I just had asthma. Those are not answers. Well, let me backtrack. If it was asthma, let's validate it. If it's not asthma, let's find out what it is. And unfortunately, that's what we're finding out. We continued on this path. I was treated in Tucson, Arizona, as I mentioned before, through 80 sessions. I have found significant help and assistance through this treatment. I am the National Legislative Committee member for the VFW. Would you have hope that if I'm telling you that I could not grab a refrigerator door and I'm on 48 medications, would you put me as the national representative for your organization, whether it be a veteran service organization or any organizations, knowing what you know now? I was also able to co-author a book called The Promise, which outlines our journey through not only the state of Michigan, but also federally, to get what's called the PACT Act passed for over 5 million veterans. This is what we do. Until my last breath, I will make sure that every veteran gets the opportunities afforded to them that was given to me. 877,450 veterans are assumed to have an estimated TBI or PTSD. 24,000 in the state of Michigan, as a representative says. I was a lucky one. I got a grant. I was able to be helped by organizations outside of the VA to be able to receive answers, have hope, and now my testimony brings us all together in solidarity to help other veterans in the future. I thank the committee's time for this opportunity, and I'm willing to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Representative Rogers, for bringing this to our attention. And thank you very much, Mr. Hensley, for your sharing your story with us. That is a number, 24,000 veterans in Michigan who would benefit from this. That is, hard to ignore when you look at the experience that you've had. So thank you for sharing your story. One question, when you're in this chamber, it sounds like you can actually talk with the other veterans who are with you while you're...
It's somewhat difficult.
Right.
It's kind of like taking an airplane flight when you're
Right.
when the pressure comes and your ears are popping a little bit. You may be able to talk to somebody if their ears pop, but if they don't, we kind of did. If I'm struggling with my mask, I can do this, or we kind of figured out with everybody. What was going on, but it's kind of like the Darth Vader mask. You're breathing in the oxygen. You can't really hear too well, but if they start signaling or tapping on you because you're right across from each other, you can kind of communicate that way. Yes.
And how quickly did you begin to feel some relief from the treatments, or did you have to finish all 80?
No, after my second dive, I was able to take my first deep breath in 16 years. It scared me, I will tell you that, because of the fact that I was used to having to stop. And as I was taking this breath and it kept going, I was able to do that after my second dive.
Nice. Representative St. Germain has a question.
The picture of your brain that was up there, like how many treatments did you receive, say, from left to right?
This was actually from the sit-back scan. This was before I went and received treatment. Okay. I actually received the, the initial 40 dives and the reassessment. This is when the MRI DTI was given to me after my 15th dive.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
What is the cost of a treatment without insurance?
It'll range anywhere between $150 to $250 per dive.
Do we have any other questions?
I will also tell the committee, if I may, that suicide prevention is not one size fits all. A hyperbaric is an option that we can use, similar to what used to be considered foreign science or alternative science with chiropractor and acupuncture. Now it is a standard of care in the VA. The best thing we can do is put hyperbaric as a standard of care and give veterans that option as well to actually treat and heal our vets with brain wounds associated with TBI and PTSD.
Thank you. It sounds like an amazing treatment beyond just veterans, but certainly for veterans. So thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Next, we will take up my concurrent resolution, HCR 5. The committee will go at ease. Call of the chair.
The committee will come back to order. Chair Conlon, if you'd like to go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. As you all know, this past month, we held a two-part series of hearings on veterans' mental health and suicide prevention. What we heard was both shockingly troubling and promising. Yet the most pertinent observation coming from these hearings is this: there is still much work to be done at both the state and federal level to address the issue in a meaningful way. House Concurrent Resolution 5 is simple. It calls on Congress, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Veterans Affairs to better concentrate its resources on a number of treatment options that are considered non-technological in nature. I am grateful that Rep. Julie Rogers was able to reintroduce her resolution, which focuses on a specific technology-based treatment method. From buddy-to-buddy programs to outdoor therapy, greater access to service animals, and increased research in psychedelic-assisted interventions, it is time for our government to invest more in solution-oriented endeavors to provide options for our service members. Our military members deserve the absolute best upon their return from duty, but we, as a nation, often fail to provide the necessary wraparound services that are needed to process events and emotions from perhaps the most traumatizing line of work that exists, the choice to put everything on the line for one's country. This concurrent resolution is but a first step in tackling the challenging issue at hand. I strongly encourage your support, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee. Thank you again for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you, Chair Conlon. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Rep. Rogers.
I don't really have a question. I just want to say thank you to the chair for bringing these forward. I've received several notes of thanks from veterans in my district lately for taking up this topic in your committee and addressing the mental health crisis amongst our veterans. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? The committee will go at ease.
The committee will come to order. Thank you, members and those in attendance, for taking the time to hear our resolutions. I have two cards in support of H.R. 119. Tim Paxson, who does not wish to speak but supports the bill, and Jim Sigmund, who does not wish to speak but supports the bill with MOAA. We will now vote them out, starting with House Resolution 119. Representative Wigella moves to report H.R. 119 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Conlon,
Yes.
Representatives Coleman,
Yes.
T. Carter,
Yes.
Stone,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Wagella,
Yes.
Markkinen,
Yes.
Bazat, Martin, St. Germain.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays, 0 pass. Motion prevails.
House Resolution 119 is reported with recommendation. Representative Rogers moves to report HCR 5 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll? I have one card first for that one. Again, not wishing to speak but supporting the bill, Tim Paxson. Representative Rogers moves to report HCR 5 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Conlon,
Yes.
Representatives Coleman,
Yes.
T. Carter,
Yes.
Stone,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Wagella,
Yes.
Markkinen,
Yes.
Bazat, Martin, St. Germain.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays, 0 pass. The motion prevails.
House Concurrent Resolution 5 is reported with recommendation. Before we finish today, I wanted to say thank you to the entire committee, because yesterday the governor signed PA 42, which designates June 12th every year to be Michigan Women's Veteran Recognition Day. Thank you, Rep. Rogers, for bringing that forward. And we were able to celebrate with them last night in Detroit, and we had Senator Kleinfeld there as well, and they were very appreciative, and it was a wonderful celebration with a woman there who's 105, who is probably one of the oldest living female veterans. So thank you for that. We need a motion to excuse Representative Bizant and Martin from today's committee meeting. Representative Markinen moves. There being no objections, Representative Bizant and Martin are excused. Seeing no further business before the committee is adjourned.